On today's episode, we get our first look at NASA's new direction. The West Space Station gears up for science and Axiom is launching AI into orbit. After months of anticipation, NASA is finally within reach of a new boss. This will be a far from the same as the old boss. He is a billionaire entrepreneur and jet fighter pilot turned commercial astronaut and a spacewalker. He is also a close friend of Elon Musk. So what happened? When Jared Eichmann went to Washington politics, the potential new NASA ambassador senator confirmation hearing dragged on of around 2.5 hours, most of which was spent on dwelling of the close ties with Mr. Musk, which will get to the first. Let's cut straight to the get good stop. Eichmann was confirmed by Texas Senate Ted Cruz. His state is heavily invested in the spaceflight industry, and such Cruz has been a long-time supporter of NASA spaceflight initiatives. Now, Mr. Cruz has now concerns about the future of those initiatives. Under Eichmann, Cruz told the Senate, "We must say the course in the reference to the Artemis moon program warning. An extreme shift in the priorities and the stage will almost certainly means a red moon sending around growing to China and the generation to come." The response Eichmann promised senators the moon and Mars, saying, "We will prioritize sending American astronauts to Mars along on the way. We will inevitably have the capabilities to return to the moon." His agreement is basically that this is not a binary discussion, it's not either moon and Mars, because we are looking at very similar technologies involved in both missions. We are sending people to an inhospitable environmental with low gravity with the initiatives to conduct science and establish a permanent human presence. The difference between in the distance. Those people will need to travel and the duration on his stay. Eichmann said, quote, "We could be paralleling these efforts and doing the near impossible." When Cruz probed in the inauguration to make his point, is sure to feature an American moon on the Chinese moon. Well, the title, well, what will 2030 look like? Eichmann reaffirmed his commitment to follow through within the exciting Artemis program to land American astronauts on the moon in his decades and the means using the existing LS rocket and Orion spacecraft. Eichmann said, "This is a grand plan. I don't believe in the best and the fastest way to get there." But he also threw inaccurate and had been exacting to hear. He continued it, "I don't think it's the long-term way we get to end. From the moon and Mars, we get frequency, but this is a plan we have now. Jared and under unique pressures on these issues because the crew of the Artemis 2 mission just happened to be in attendance and confirmation." Eichmann acknowledged them by saying, "We get to get this crew around the moon and follow one crew to land on the moon." Now, you may or may not have picked up on some coded messages that Jared may or may not have been sending through this answer. And if such a message is exciting, I would say that he is willing to tolerate the exacting Artemis plans and headed against the immediate thrust of Chinese moon landing, but behind that we are ready to align these patriots with Elon Musk and the Mars colonization efforts. Will be supported heavily by the SpaceX Starship vehicle, but SpaceX is going to need a lot of people with the majestic logistics, and the NASA will be provided. But there is other elephant in the room. The International Space Station. Does Jared aligns the Musk on the future of the ISS? Because if so, that will mean imminent destructions on only non-Chinese space station is existing Musk, and stated publicly that I feel the ISS holds true value and should be deorbited as soon as possible. This is where Eichmann definitely broke rank from Elon. He said to the Senate, "I am familiar with Mr. Musk's remarks on what I would like to understand, and behind that them He made a very clear statement on his own opinion, saying, I don't think blowing we should deorbit it now. I think we need to make the most use of the space station while we have it and figure out and accomplishing in the unique environment of the microgravity. A lot was made over this idea as Ackman would be nothing more than an anonymous proxy, but it controlled over the US space program in a more direct response and ever in the alliance like man told the Senate court. I want to be absolutely clear. My loyalty is to this nation, the space agency, and their world-changing mission. SpaceX is a contractor, NASA is a customer. They work for us. We not an around another way. So his theory, Eichmann is saying all the right things and around the space community. He is widely seen as a good choice to lead the next chapter at NASA, but there's still a pretty big question around what kind of space program will be left. Eichmann might have control over the direction of the agency, but one thing that doesn't control is the money. Might be very high problem in the very near future. We have early and unconfirmed reports that President Trump wants to make a significant cut on NASA operating budget. The thing about this personal proposal, if true, would be targeted reductions and its target is science. Approximately 50% of the dedications science funding for NASA will evaporate, leading in some pretty losses. Mars sample return will be finished. The long-suffering diving missions to Venus will be put out if the mercy of good NASA Next Generation Space Telescope, the NASA Nike Grace Roman, which is already constructed, will be put on an indefinite pause on also force the closer and NASA Graded Space Flight Center, and those are just the headline gambling outcomes. The hostilitic effects on the budget on the fields of the astrophysics and the planetary science will be destroyed. Now we're looking to the reason why I don't like Donald Trump doesn't care about space. In fact, he seems to love space. There wouldn't even to be an Artemis program without Trump. He created the Space Force. He's already announced his intention to build a grand network to missiles, defense satellites, and he said the inauguration speech and want to put Americans on the planet Mars. The science stuff, however, we are really Greeky need kind of king that doesn't get as much attention. And Jared Eichmann is not declared and his own Peter He's a huge enthusiast of the human space flight. He's put his money and his own life on the line of the future development on the commercial spaceflight programs and SpaceX, but he's not a scientist. And them, of course, there's Elon Musk very panicked about going to Mars, building rockets, colonizations deep into the engineering side of things, but also not a science guy. So if you are into info, we are going on here. We are probably looking at the reduction and the pre-parallelization of NASA's away of the theoretical and into the practical, the winds of change and blowing strong. So stay tuned. So what? Now, for those who don't care about science, we're jumping back into the story of Heaven 1 space station. This is quickly trending into Americans' next best shot. Futuristic outsports in low Earth orbit. Heaven 1 is not only critically big on fancy, which is probably the reason why it's progressing so fast, and that leads into the first round of the customer players that will be on the board of the space station. Well, it files and the space has yearly and the next year. There's a Japan Manned Space Station Corporation which has supported research on Japan Kibo module on the ISS. They'll provide a multiple-purpose playout facility on the microgravity research on Heaven 1. Installer lab in the French company that will provide advanced life sciences research facilities called Eden 1.0 that will be issued to the experiments such as plant growth in base on the Luxembourg and will fly to the biotechnology player to inform pharmaceutical and healthcare experiments. There are the new opportunities. These new announcements join into the previously reported science players in Heaven 1. There's Redwire Space, which will be provide its advanced space experiment processors and a pillbox. Experiments platform, both of the which and previously being used on the ISS and Yuri, a European space biotech company, will provide its NASA taxis in indicator and funding provide its science in taxi in collaborator and funding experiment planned on the Heaven 1 lab. Heaven 1 we can 10 mind deck locker and the research players. Some of those now have been told of these partners are being reversed by West of use by the crews in the West Space Station. There's a locker, same standard on the ISS, but is a little bit different. Enthusiasts of Heaven 1, the locker will be located behind wood planning on the end of the module. The opens up and assess the players. The idea is that while using the player's crew and close it and may have a more relaxing experience kind of work-life boundary in the space. Meanwhile, Axiom is launching some competitors into space. The commercial company will launch into orbiting data center modules into low Earth orbit by the end of this year. This is the first step of the development of planet computing infrastructure. The pioneering satellites will be used to draw data from Earth observing satellites drawing and complex and AI machine learning algorithm and speed up the delivery of the valuable insights to use on the ground. So thank you so much.